Well, MyEFO, the mid-year economic budget update, will be handed down in, well, just about an hour's time. So we will see whether the words fit the actions. Treasurer Jim Chalmers has been trying to position this Labor government as responsible economic managers, and we can judge when we see the details at 10:30 this morning. Joining me now is the Shadow Finance Minister, Jane Hume. Jane, thanks so much for your time. What will you be looking for?
Well, Laura, I'll be looking for a number of things. First of all, whether the savings that the Treasurer continues to talk about are in fact genuine savings or whether they're reprioritisations in inverted commas, because let's face it, a savings isn't really a saving if you spend it on something else. I'll also be looking to see where the revenue is coming from because, quite frankly, the tax take in this country has gone up by around 27%. The iron ore price is around twice that as it was forecast in the budget. And let's face it, if you've got a windfall gain like that, it's not coming from growing the economy, it's coming from just sheer dumb luck. So when this government talks about banking the savings from its windfall gains, what it's actually asking for is a pat on the back for not spending money that it hadn't forecasted it was going to get and that it had no actual responsibility for creating. I'll also be looking for some of the things that aren't in the budget or aren't in MyEFO. For instance, are the aged care wage rises included in this MyEFO? And the biggest save in the last budget was in fact from the NDIS, which came down from a 14% per year growth in expenditure to 8%. But what we discovered was that there was no policy to back that up. It was essentially just an expenditure cap without any policy substance. Now that the policy has been announced, we know that the government is going to have to pay off the states in order to create that lower level of spending on the NDIS. Will that payment to the states be included in this MyEFO as well? And of course, the most important thing is this MyEFO going to demonstrate that the government is reining in its expenditure ambitions? Because they're saying that that the fiscal policy is in fact in lockstep with monetary policy, but monetary policy is contractionary. Unless this government can demonstrate that their fiscal position is also contractionary, well, then they're just trying to pull the wool over your eyes. In fact, it's the RBA that are going to end up doing all the heavy lifting to reduce inflation. And unless you reduce inflation, there is no way you can reduce the cost of living for all Australians.
Well, it does look like two surpluses in a row delivered by this Labor government, something that your side of politics couldn't do.
Well, certainly when the tax take is as high as it is, Australians are paying the price for that surplus. In fact, we know that real disposable incomes in this country have gone backwards by about 8.6% since Labor came to power. And the reason why that is threefold: from inflation, from high interest rates, and because there are higher taxes. Those higher taxes are contributing to that windfall gain, as are high commodity prices. But you can't expect to pat a government on the back for not spending windfall gains that it wasn't expecting in the first place. What is the government doing to actually grow the pie, to grow the economy? Because let's face it, we're already in a per capita recession. If it wasn't for those high migration figures, GDP would be going backwards.
Jane, so let me get this clear. On the one hand, you're saying the government needs to rein in spending, but at the same time, you're saying it does need to spend. Can you just explain that for me and where you think the government should be spending money?
No, I'm sorry. I think you've misunderstood me there, Laura. Maybe I wasn't clear. We want to see the government rein in its spending ambitions. There is no doubt that 9 years in opposition meant that this government came to power with a wish list of things that it would like to do. And of course, the newly minted Treasurer and Finance Minister find it very hard to say no to their colleagues. They've said, oh, there's no shortage of good ideas. Well, unfortunately, one of the great disciplines of government is the ability to say no, to make sure that the government is spending only where it is going to cause more damage to the economy. Now, quite frankly, if you look at this government's agenda, whether it be in energy, whether it be in industrial relations, it's actually creating productivity sapping policies, not things that are going to grow the economy. Unless you can sustainably grow the economy and make sure that your spending doesn't grow at a faster rate than the economy, or you're setting yourself up to go backwards in an unsustainable way.
So should this government spend to ease cost of living?
Well, this government has already started spending to ease cost of living, but quite frankly, it's only putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. The only way to sustainably bring down the cost of living is to reduce inflation.
And how
the
should a
only way to
government
reduce
do that?
inflation, The only way to reduce inflation is to make sure that your fiscal position is in line with your monetary policy position. If you don't make your fiscal policy and your monetary policy aligned, it's like having one foot on the brake, one foot on the accelerator, and that's not a way to run the economy. We want to see Labor rein in its spending ambitions. Let's face it, Australian families are having to make some really tough decisions right now with their household budgets. This Labor government should be doing the same.
Okay, but it's in a pretty good fiscal position if we're talking about surpluses. Yeah, I can see the underlying spending and what that might mean for the years ahead. But should there be any direct payments to those families doing it tough?
Well, they've already made direct payments to families that are doing it tough, but quite frankly, those families will continue to do it tough if inflation continues. And inflation here is homegrown. It's not just me saying that, it's Michelle Bullock saying that. The OECD, Chris Richardson, Sherelle Murphy, economists across the board are saying government spending is actually making the inflation situation worse. It's making inflation
what would
stay
you
higher
do?
for
What would
longer,
your side of
which makes
politics do
interest rates
if you had
stay
this
higher
budget?
for longer? Well, I think you have to rein in those spending ambitions and rather invest in productivity creating policies, not like making your workplace less flexible, not like putting ideology over reducing power prices and increasing supply into the energy system.
All right, so you're talking
Because
about IR.
until you reduce
so you
those
think
costs,
those issues are the number
industrial
one
relations,
inflation?
red tape. You have to grow the economy. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But you do that through pulling policy levers that create productivity. You can't simply give wage rises to everybody without having that accompanying productivity, or you're going to make the inflation situation worse. You don't need to believe me or the coalition. You can believe Philip Lowe. That was what he said 6 months ago. And yet it seems that the government has done the exact opposite. You have to have a government that is taking inflation seriously, has to have a plan to tackle inflation head on, not just leave all the heavy lifting to the RBA. If a government does that, well, essentially it's failed in its duty to reduce the cost of living, because the cost of living will stay higher for longer if inflation stays higher for longer.
Okay, we will wait to see what Jim Chalmers comes up with at 10:30 this morning. Jane Hume, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
You too, Laura.